Welcome everybody to the March Science and Engineering Council meeting. We're here still online every second Wednesday of the month, and we're hoping to at least start migrating to a hybrid format, but we're working on that, and we'll have some more details in the next month or two. Again, working through the details and a couple of venues that we have in mind. So stay tuned for that, please. Thanks everybody for signing up for today's discussion. We've got I think there'll be more people joining as we get into this, but just want to say welcome to everybody who's here, and briefly introduce board members aside from myself. We've got Yvonne DeGraw, Steve Skopatz, Bill Theringer, and Cheryl Ebner on the line from the SEC, and we may have a couple others. You can raise your hand if you're here. Let's see. With that, I think don't have a lot of other announcements, but so I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Yvonne, to discuss upcoming meetings, and then we'll launch into today's discussion.
Great, thanks, Tim. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Our next meeting, just to give you a heads up, will be April 12th. Professor Misha Shroff from UCSB's Computer Science Department will speak on artificial intelligence and its interaction with perception and human behavior at our April meeting. And on May 10th, Professor Ben Halpern from UCSB's Bren School will speak on the environmental footprint of food production at our May meeting. We're going to be testing a location in Goleta that's set up to accommodate hybrid meetings, as Tim mentioned. And hopefully we'll be looking at having hybrid meetings sometime in the coming months. As always, feel free to contact me about particular topics or speakers you'd like to suggest for our meetings. And if you're interested in our past meetings, we have a YouTube channel with recorded meetings from the past year or so. Subtitles are provided during today's talk if you enable live transcript in your Zoom window. And you can type questions into the Zoom chat during the talk or ask them after the talk. Today, we're very happy to have Bob Allen speaking to us. He's the creative director of Pale Blue Dot Ventures and a founder and chief storytelling officer of IDEAS, which stands for Innovation, Design, Entertainment, Art, and Storytelling. Bob has held a variety of positions with Disney's live entertainment divisions at Disneyland, Disney World, and Disneyland International. He's led teams designing several attractions that would become part of Epcot, including Spaceship Earth and the American Adventure. He was responsible for all facilities and services at Disney MGM Studios, as well as the operation of Disney Ideas, a full-service content studio. In 2001, he formed Integrity Arts and Technology, which bought out IDEAS. Today, IDEAS is a branding and experience design firm using the power of purposeful storytelling to create brands, transform organizational cultures, and design and enhance immersive experiences. IDEA's over 3,500 diverse projects have included designing urban developments in China, re-engineering the Walter Reed Hospital patient experience, designing the guest experience for Spaceport America, inventing new genres of themed entertainment, and creating an original animated series helping school kids to be more fit. Welcome, Bob. I'll let you take it away.
You know, I have a bio that I should send instead of that one that begins, "He was raised by wolves." More appropriate. Well, thank you all for being patient with my schedule blip and for letting me spend some time with you today. I'm going to jump here and grab some PowerPoint because, you know, PowerPoint. So give me, everybody can see that? You can, yes? Okay, good. So we're going to kind of do a couple of things. We're going to do a little bit of short work here on, I want to give you, it's not a commercial. I just want to give you some context a little more context about who we are and what we do, because it will inform the way the rest of this goes. Then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our methodology. You know, when Yvonne approached me about doing this, I said, listen, I'm a science fan, but I'm not a science guy. You know, I'm a writer and a guitar player. So, you know, that'll be okay. So I will at least pretend to a method, which I'll share with you. And then sort of as the case study for how does that method work, we'll walk a little bit through where we are in Space Base California. And then if you have something fun to talk about or argue about, let's do that. All right, so we're going to start here. Just my point of view real quick, because that'll sort of be what you hear. I did go to college. No one was terribly harmed. And I evidently graduated. I have a degree somewhere. I am self-described as a musician and a media freak, and my day job is I'm a writer. I'm a word person. I did spend a 26-year career with Disney. For the last 21 years after buying my division, I've sort of been what I would call the reluctant entrepreneur. Remember, my degree's in communication, not business, but we've stumbled along okay. But I will tell you what I do share, what I lack, I guess, in formal education, training, and skill. I more than make up for in passion. I am the poster child space and science nerd, card carrying. And just to prove that, this is a picture of me in 1965 preparing for my career as an astronaut. I could not get an actual astronaut helmet. That happens to be a Colonel Scott McLeod test pilot helmet, which I still have. But I do want you to know that when me and my team talk about space, we really are speaking, if not from a point of knowledge, at least from a point of passion. So, as noted, we did a buyout. We kind of combined a bunch of Disney businesses, mashed them together, got rid of the excess overhead, trimmed the fat, and said, hey, how much fun could we have doing the things we love to do, telling stories? And it turned out there were lots of form factors for that. And we've been doing that ever since. We're real small. There's only 9 of us. We're based in Orlando. This is sort of us. It's a little tongue in cheek, but it's fun. We are predominantly right-brainers. We're sort of creatives, but we have deep and abiding respect for the analytical side of the business because, as I kind of hope I demonstrate today, to do what we do and do it appropriately, you've got to have a blend. It's got to be both sides of that equation working all the time, hand in glove. The stuff we do is generically this. We can create brands, or if you have a brand, we can help it not be lazy. We do lots of destination experience design. That can be a science center, a museum, a theme park, a restaurant, anything, any venue where humans go. We do lots of training and what we call enculturation as an aspect of our branding, because it turns out, particularly in the destination entertainment world, human beings deliver the experience. If you don't teach them what the brand means and how to wear it, then you don't get it right. So we do an awful lot of that in our work. And of course, we certainly can make content all day long, from a website to a giant screen 3D movie and everything in between. We've played a lot. We've had some fun clients over the years. It's not all entertainment. We, interestingly, have worked for almost all the big aerospace companies, for instance, mainly helping them take highly technical industrial processes and make them entertaining and interesting for regular folks, which has really been fun. Played in a lot of science venues and also some just straight up theme parks. And we've done branding assignments for really some of the biggest organizations in the world. Here's though, when we do that stuff, here's sort of why people come to us. There's one of 2 reasons. If you are old enough, you will know what this means. If you're not, please see someone over 50 and they will explain it. But the Sputnik moment was that time in the 50s when North America woke up and said, oh my gosh, the Russians are in orbit. Whatever will we do? The sky is falling. Our hair is on fire. And what resulted from that was the space program. This is a response to, man, we are in real trouble. We better come up with something great. Design me something great. And when I worked years ago, I was fortunate enough to work with Gene Kranz at NASA. And I asked him about this. I said, how'd you guys figure it out? He said, we didn't. He said, we just agreed that if we put enough 20-somethings in a room and told them they could do it, that they would. And they did. It was really interesting. So that's one reason people come at this notion of designing something new. Here's the other one, and it's kind of diametrically opposed. I call this one the Disneyland moment. So there's a myth that Disneyland was this marvelous, ethereal act of creative brilliance. It wasn't. It's creative enough, but it was pragmatic, just like the Sputnik moment, except on the opposite end. Walt used to take his daughters to Griffith Park on Saturday, and the way he told the story was his kids would play, and he'd sit on a bench and eat peanuts. And he finally said, you know, I should get to play too. There ought to be someplace parents and kids can play together. He said, I got all these movies and stuff. What if? And that's what we call the Disneyland moment, right? And look, the brands on the right-hand side of the screen are simply, these are examples of people who figured that out. They've taken a paradigm and said, yeah, wait a minute, what if, right? This is more where we play, and it's very specifically where we are playing as we look at Space Base California and the project that we have kind of at hand today. So let's talk a little bit about kind of, where things go here. You're all familiar with scientific method, no doubt, being science folk. And I love the scientific method. I love it more, actually, as we kind of enter a period of human history that tends to be factually resistant. I think it's great, and I think it works. It really, really works well. It's just held up so well over time. Even something like the standard physics model. Yes, does it have holes in it? Yeah, subparticle level, there's some goofy stuff that it's not quite right on. We haven't figured out that gravity problem yet. On the other hand, it's real good most of the time at really explaining why the universe acts how it acts. So I would argue the scientific method is a very, very valid construct for understanding how things are and designing ways you might act on those systems. Although it's typically positioned kind of opposite, it isn't, but there is this thing that's been called design thinking. This slide and the two after this is the last time you'll hear me use that term. I don't like that term. It was made up by people in my business to make themselves feel important. It's not important. Every human being is by nature a design thinker. You want to see design thinking at work, watch a mom with 2 kids. I rest my case. It's different because we're looking at not just what can we know and measure, what's ambiguous, what's gooey and messy and sloppy and floating around out there in the ether and like, I don't know, feels like this. I saw one of these once, what if? Because when we look at those sides, hidden parameters start to open up. And when they open up, it starts to say, well, we could go from here to here. On the other hand, we could also go from here to here or here to here. So my argument is this notion of design thinking, which is a little bit more exploratory and a little bit riskier and a little bit more open-ended, also works. It's a really good model. You wouldn't use it to figure out a physics problem, but it turns out to be a really good model for figuring out certain kinds of things, particularly innovative design solutions. What we do is a hybrid. So we take the very best of the design thinking notion, and sorry, my model stepped on my text there, and we marry that with what we call the science of guestology, and it really is a science. I'm going to explain a lot more about what that means, but essentially it combines really, really good analytical data crunching with really, really sophisticated industrial engineering to create predictive models of how human beings are going to act. And we work with people who are pretty good at it. I'm actually married to a person who's pretty good at it. So the idea is a really improved future result in a specific context. And we define that by who's coming and what is it and all that stuff. So when we look at the way we're working, we sort of have called it story-based design. So there's this notion in design thinking of intermediate solutions, right? It's like, well, we're not sure where this ends up. However, if this plus this, then this. Okay, let's go that far and then go out and measure and look again, right? What we call those intermediate solutions are stories. And mostly you can make them up. All humans do. It's what we do. It's the only thing we do better than all the other creatures, right? We have this weird evolutionary skill. And by the way, we took over a whole planet. But even though we don't have claws or big teeth and we don't, live very long and our young, evidently based on personal experience, our young cannot survive on their own for at least 30 years. How do we take over a planet? Well, we have this evolutionary endowment of being able to take something in here and get it in there. Now, cetaceans can do it, octopuses can do it. There's other creatures besides us who do it. Nobody quite does it the way we do it, though. We're really good at it. So that story making points out all these starting points and alternate paths. And the most magical thing is sometimes when you do that, it turns out that not only are there branches in the path to get where you're going, it turns out we're not even starting from where we thought. We're going to start from somewhere completely different because it looks like a better place to start from. So that's kind of the background about the bridge between science thinking and design thinking. So that is underneath really our methodology. Oh, by the way, also brains really like stories. Some neurologists, and they're neuroscientists, they're not philosophers. They wrote a book some years ago with the unlikely title of Why God Won't Go Away. It's not about religion, it's about brains, but I recommend it to you if you like that kind of thing. It's a good one. Basically, what these guys were doing was studying brains, and particularly studying brains that often meditated and how they might differ both in electrical output and also in physiology from brains that don't meditate. How are they structured? And they said one of the byproducts was this thing they discovered called the cognitive imperative. And what that means is human minds, and they generally come with a brain, really are uncomfortable not making sense out of their world. Your mind is hardwired to make sense out of things. The way I always talk about this is there is a subliminal story you tell yourself every morning. And it goes like this: when I stand up, my feet will stick to the floor. If you didn't believe that, you'd cling to your bed and not try standing up because you'd be afraid you'd fly off into the cosmos somewhere. So you make that up. We always do that. It turns out our brains are giant story processors. That's all they do all the time is make up narratives, and they get them far enough along. And then there's a little part of your brain that says, yeah, good to go. We'll stamp that one as true. Moving on. So brains really like stories. They're great integrators. I know that this split brain model that's on the screen is completely wrong, but it's a nice metaphor. And what we find is, as opposed to say facts or even logic, information presented to a human brain in the form of a narrative lights up the whole brain, which is really fun. So that's the other reason we like to play with story. Okay, let's get a little more into process. We reverse engineer. There, now you know our dirty secret. We really don't create anything. We start with an outcome and we reverse engineer back to present day. In the case of destination entertainment, which I will claim applies to this particular project, we have a set of performance metrics that we call destination performance that are required if you want to have an economically successful destination entertainment project. You need more people to come over time. You need them to stay longer each time they come. You need them to spend a little bit more money each time they visit. You need them to be real happy when they leave and tell you that. You need them to come back more often than they did last year. And particularly in the days of TripAdvisor, you need them to go on the internet and tell their friends. And that's how you're successful. If you get 3 of those going, you can be pretty successful. If you get all 6, you're really doing a good job. When we design, we back into these performance metrics as the initial step in design, which means we instantly apply constraints. So the other thing I'll tell you about effective experience design is, now, if you're just doing this for art's sake, this doesn't hold, but we usually work for clients who want to make a profit. Not everyone does. If you want to make a profit, you have to get this right. Otherwise, you're creating something that will be aesthetically pleasing and not last very long because you won't be able to afford it. So that's where we start. And then we employ this very simple practicum on that story-based design. So you always want to start over here. We always say this, and you'll hear me say it again in a video in just a minute. We always say, you never ever build from the ground up. You always build from the audience out, from the guest out. You start with them. I learned this by being a very poorly paid guitar player. If you play the guitar in a Holiday Inn bar, and that night, the Holiday Inn bar is full of electrical linemen, mostly from Oklahoma and Texas, and you don't know that, and you play the set you played last night, which was mostly the teachers' convention, you're going to wear some beer home and you're going to have a very unpleasant night. You got to understand your audience. You have to love your audience. You actually have to appreciate them. So we start with audiences. Let's pretend we had a way of knowing them. We do, and I'll tell you about that. Then we'll go to, all right, this is the way we're all taught to solve problems. A problem shows up, condition A shows up, undesirable. Design, produce, deliver a solution, and meet an objective. Where I used to work, if you hit your objective, you got a bonus. If you didn't, they kind of smack you around and talk bad about you. If you are better than Babe Ruth at what you do, you will bat 650. He batted 500. You'll bat 650, which means you will get this right 65% of the time. The rest of the time you're going to miss and you're going to have to start over. Starting over in our world can mean jacking up the footers of concrete and calling the bulldozers back out. It's very expensive. So we kind of said, how do you do this in a way that doesn't do that? It's real easy. Remember, we know our audience. We get it. We know who they are. We know what our issues are, what our objective is. So what story do we live in with our audience? What audience behaviors do we want? Secret hint, we just described them. Those 6 things need to happen. We want them to act that way. Okay, backing up then, what experience could we give an audience, a known audience, that would get them to act the way we want? And then we can change the story, and then we can design, produce, and deliver, and we'll be right 90% of the time and bat a 900. More importantly, we'll build that dotted line, and now we have a relationship. We're living in a relationship with an audience, and that's critical because unlike movies or books maybe, but unlike movies, say, or stuff on the internet, or certainly things like TikTok, when you're going to put $100 million in the ground, that's got to last 50, 60, 70 years. We need that relationship. We need a multi-generational relationship to make that work. So it's real important to forge that as we do our work. So here's the sort of the way we think. We start again with our audience, right? There they are. And I'm going to use a science metaphor, physics metaphor again. I call this the experience reactor. So we've got our audience sitting there in the middle, kind of around the top, if you will, of the reactor. The reactor core is made of 3 columns. The first one is culture. We can't do anything about it. We can know what it is. We can know who our audiences are, but we can't do anything about it. But it's knowable. So that gets bolted down to the floor of our reactor. The second one is expectation. We have better control over that. It's blunt, it's gross, but we have better control, right? So we use things like marketing and communication and storytelling to begin to line that expectation up with that culture. So we use that tool and we scoot that piece of the reactor core over and bolt it down. And the idea is to overlap it as much as we can with that culture. The last core element of our reactor is delivery. We have ultimate control over that. Millions of dials and knobs, that's ours. We get to control that from design all the way through operations. So we can really fine tune this. We'll take that one and line it up very carefully with the other 2. Once we do that, we fire into our reactor, essentially particles of story, right? And these are, we've really press the metaphor, we call them storyons, right? But these are the storyons. These are the things that make a story. When you fire that all in there, that reactor gets to critical mass, it takes off. And what happens to those folks in the middle is what Coleridge called willing suspension of disbelief. They go, that sounds cool, let's go do that. Or I really like this movie, or whatever it is we're doing with them. Once we kind of get there, then we actually take that narrative construct and decompose it into these kinds of components and express them as physical assets and operational protocols. And that's what actually drives what we call experience design. Okay, and I know we're drinking from a fire hose here, but I'm trying to be cognizant of your time. So, moving forward, couple of quick notes. While we're doing that these days, we're thinking about these 10 things because the world of destination immersive entertainment is not what it used to be. Neither good nor bad, it's just different. These aren't the 10 things. These are 10 things we worry about a lot. Other designers will tell you there are different things, but we really think these are the ones that have to drive us. So really specific stories. It's all about niche casting these days. You have to remember that 51% of the world is now a Z or a millennial or an alpha, and their brains don't look like ours. So we have to think about that, right? Because that's who's coming. got to be wrapped in a brand. Everybody wants things to be personal. It's got to be applicable to me. We call that the audience of me. These experiences have to scale. It has to be fun to go on a really cool, upbeat, crowded day when there's a launch at Vandenberg Air Force Base. It also has to be really fun to go on a Wednesday in February when the wind's kind of blowing and there's not too many people there. So scaling's important. Guests want to own your brand. They don't want to visit you. They want to own you. These days, that experience has to be out there for our guests before they come and after they leave. You've got a built-in perpetual freshness. We always tell our clients, getting to opening day, that's 20% of the battle. The rest is what do we do for the next 30 years? Because you got to keep it fresh. People like to do, they don't want to watch. They can watch at home, they can watch on their phone. And it's funny, stories don't have to be true to be good, but guests don't like it if you try to do fake stuff. So authenticity is really important. So those are the things that sort of keep us awake. The last thing I'll remind you is something that John Hench, who was one of the co-founders of WED, which became Walt Disney Imagineering in later days. There's John with Walt. John was the key artist and designer at WED, designed Disneyland, among other things. And even though he was a designer, his famous quote is, hey, the guests don't leave whistling the lights in the architecture, which is just to say, all of that I just said does show up in what's on the ground, but it all ties back to that story. Okay, I'll take a breath. You take a breath. So here's the way we work. Having said all of that as the iceberg that's under the water, here's the tip that pokes out. Remember our friends, the performance metrics, they're still there. So to get those, we do this. And it's just a model for design. And these are the components. So on the project, we're going to go through in short form and kind of look at together. We started here with what we call system mapping. That's literally understanding what we call the actuals. That's story harvesting. In the case of Space Base California, that was many, many days on the ground in Central California, talking to small groups of people and not telling them, but saying, space, tell us about that. You care? Is it interesting? Why is it interesting? Have you ever tried that? You think that would be fun? Really? What is fun? It's really understanding. And I will tell you this because I do it a lot. If a group of people, children or adults, feel safe, they will tell you. They will simply start telling you stories because they're humans. And it's amazing how deep and valid that information is. So after days and days of doing that, we come up with a pretty good sense of whether it's empirically true or not. Here's perceptual ground truth as it relates to these topics about space and engaging space and why we care or do we care, and tourism on the Central Coast and all those kinds of things. So we really do get to build a pretty good foundation of here's kind of how things sit. Okay, then we turn that completely on its head. There's this process we do called Story Jam. That's our trade dress. That's what we call it. I have spent lots of time in, they're sometimes called brainstorming sessions or ideation sessions, or my very most unfavorite, the charrette, which is an architecture thing. And they're truly horrible because they're elitist and you have to be a designer to really participate, and they're competitive because you're fighting against the other groups. And by the end of them, there's 900 pages of arrows and circles and illegible words, and they all go on the wall and then nobody knows what to do with them. And they're very unsatisfying. We turn that all inside out. Story Jam says, hey, let's get 25 people in the room who sort of care about this, and we're going to tell some stories together about how we think that might look. It always works. Humans love to tell stories. That's the opposite. If culture mapping or system mapping says, hey, here's how it's perceived now, Story Jam says, here's the story we would love to have be true. So we call that design fiction sometimes. It's not true, but we can write it in such a way that it really sounds and feels true. If we can do that, then all we have to do is build a bridge from where we are to what that story says is true. And that is the red circle. That's what we call an experience design plan. And I'll say more about what that's got in it. But that is the Bible. That is the map. That is the chart pack. That's the formula that gets us magically from where we are to that end state defined in our narrative. Along the way, we're going to go talk to our guestologists, our friends. We use an outside company for this. They're also ex-Disney folks. We say, hey, here's our ideas. Go tell us if our audience agrees. And they go out, before we do too much, they go out and do primary research. For those of you who are researchy, you know the difference, right? Primary research is, we're going to go ask people who look a lot like the people we're doing this for what they really think. Not, yeah, we looked it up on the internet and generally speaking, we do both of those, but the primary appeal research is critical to this. Because what's going to happen is we're going to put 28 really cool ideas in that experience design plan, and about 7 of them are going to be really worth doing, because those are the ones that the people who we're asking to participate actually like, and they'll tell you if you ask them. Once we get that, we can do a straight up design, build, executional plan. We can take that into a brand. We can first train the brand, then we can activate the brand in the market. And then if all that goes really well, in about 33 months, there's a big grand opening and a bunch of folks show up. So that is our methodology. That's really the underpinnings of, we say, how do you do this? That's how we do it. So now I'll show you a little bit about hopefully how that applies. So moving into our case study, welcome to Space Base, California. First of all, that's the brand. It's had about 11 names since we started the project. You might have heard it called the California Space Academy. It's been called lots of things. The reason that's the brand is that we tested 6, and that one won by 20 percentage points over all the other. And our secret weapon there is we only test brand names that we already like, so we don't care what they pick. We're glad to use the one the audience likes, and that's the one they like. I think those colors are a little off, but the good news is I'm a writer and not an art director, and someone much smarter than me will figure that out. What Space Base California is exactly what it says. It's an immersive destination. This thing is kind of the love child of a really cool theme park, a science center, and modeling, simulation, and training done the way the military does it. It's all that mashed up into a whole new form factor. It could be a 3-hour visit. It could be an 8-hour visit. It could be a multi-day visit. We have different ways of doing it, but that's what it is. For those of you who are not completely immersed in the destination entertainment business, the blue boxes are the lines of business. Those are the things you get to charge for when you're in our business. The four elements you see with the little icons are the basic breakdown of the 4 primary components of Space Base. One is Complex Alpha. That's the main gate. If you've been to Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex, our version of that. Come on in, you'll pay an admission, and you'll have a great day playing around in next generation space and doing really fun things and learning really fun things. The Mission Prep Academy is our version of Space Camp. We don't call it Space Camp because someone owns that, but that's what we're doing. It is a multi-day, live here, deep immersive learning experience, primarily for middle school and early high school. That said, I will show you in a minute that it spreads a little farther than that. We were quite pleased to see. That's what that is. SpaceWorks is the idea maybe someday of building 50,000, 60,000 square feet of high-tech industrial space and literally hosting space industry customers who are doing payload processing or rocket nozzle refurbishing or some literal critical path element supporting Vandenberg's launch business. And the quid pro quo is we won't charge much rent, but we want you to let our guests look through the window and see what you're doing. Same thing you do when you go to a studio tour, except in this case, it's a rocket ship tour. And finally, Earth Base is basically our take on a hotel. So imagine you could go to a wonderful immersive experience like this, and if you wanted to, you could spend the night right there on the space base instead of going down the street to the Holiday Inn. So we have an interesting lodging concept. So as we talk about Space Base California, those are the 4 primary components. We have a mission at Pale Blue Dot, and this is our mission. I won't read it, but you can. But really, entertain, educate, and inspire is really what we're doing. And honestly, the reason that they're in that order is if we entertain you, we know that you will pay enough attention that the education will happen. We call that formula making broccoli ice cream. Broccoli is really good for you, But if we chop it up real small and put it in ice cream, you'll just eat all of it we ask it to eat. And that's how we do it. Inspiration is an outcome. If you are a fifth grader or a sixth grader and someone brings you into contact with this kind of information in the right way, you're going to walk away going, I don't care what I have to do. I want to do that. And that's our goal. We really do think, besides a commercially successful enterprise, and besides being cool, and besides being a bucket of fun, we're going to help create the next generation of space folks, which is really important for our planet. So knowing all that, here's what it might look like.
As experienced designers, we usually talk about not designing from the ground up, but designing from the guest out. With that said, this piece of ground is an extraordinary palette upon which we can really paint an amazing future experience. Lompoc is unique in the world, sitting in the smack middle of the California Coastal Tourism Corridor with extraordinary view shed into Vandenberg Space Force Base.
Well, if you look at where we are today, space travel is no longer the domain of the few or exotic science fiction. Living outside Earth's atmosphere or human exploration on Mars is where we're going, and soon.
Whether you visit for a day or you spend a week with us of in-depth hands-on learning, we are here to entertain, educate, and inspire the next generation of human space travelers.
Imagine experiencing a high-G launch or driving a rover across the simulated Martian terrain. This immersive training center is an early first step in how we as a species prepare for living, working, and succeeding out in space.
This is a triple win. It's a win for our guests, it's a win for the economic development of the Central Coast, and it's a win for the planet.
So that's where we start, right? That's that first pass out of the story jam saying, hey, what could this be? Now we're going to go back and again, we're going to stepwise, we're going to go right through that process. So we've done that. So the first thing we're going to do is let's go test it. So that's leveraging research and really understanding, what's out there in the market, how big is it and all that, while we're drafting that plan. When the plan gets drafted, a little movie like that or some concept statements with some artwork go out and we do that primary research. When we get that back, we refine that plan, and I'll show you where that ends us up in a little bit. While we're working on that creative refinement, our colleagues at Integrated Insight are saying, oh, by the way, here's your attendance model, here's how many people are coming, here's why that's how many people are coming, here's who they are, here's what they said they would spend, and therefore we can take you all the way through how big your facilities have to be, what your conceptual, architectural, and engineering program probably needs to line up with, and finally, a 20-year pro forma or a 10-year pro forma that says, if you spend this much investment money, you will return this kind of return on that. And once all that package comes together, we have something that we can actually take out into the market and get funded. And I'm going real fast through a 2-year process there, but that's how all that begins to come together. So just a little bit about how the research works. When we went out with a version of that little film you just saw, we got real good results. And I have pages and pages of this, but I'm only going to show you a couple. So the first stat is 53% of the average of 53% of our respondents, and they had to be qualified, income and geographically, didn't say, yeah, I kind of like it. 53%, which by the way is extraordinarily high, gave it a 9 or a 10 out of 10. That top 2-box rating is what we count. That's what's important. We also discovered an avid fans group within that who are our real important tent poles going forward. A staggering 49% also indicated they definitely will visit. We don't ever, that number is usually 28 or 29. So we were thrilled with that result. When we said, what specifically do you like? Again, just looking at the 9 out of 10, or 9 and 10 out of 10 appeal rankings, the green ovals up there were at the top of the top. Everything on this page got a 9 out of 10, so they were all pretty good. But what this told us was go focus your experience design planning second pass on the things that might serve those top green components. So when we went back to revise the plan, that's what we did. So fundamentally, here's where that process has ended us up. One thing we heard is we want to fly. We want to feel like we're flying. So we've got a microgravity drop tower idea. We've got multi-axis trainers. We've got a robotic arm that makes you and your buddy feel like you're actually flying. It was set up to do fighter flight, but I think what we're going to do is some kind of a hypothetical planetary skimmer, maybe skirting over the surface of Io, one of Jupiter's moons, or dropping a payload package into a volcano or something like that. We've got a Paradrop VR system, again, designed for Earth simulation of literally paragliding. We're going to revise that so that you're maybe in a giant paraglider in Martian atmosphere or something. So plenty of that kind of flight simulation, both kinetic and also virtual reality driven. So answer in the mail on that one. Second thing they said was, we want to go off of Earth. What's it really like out there? Take us away, take us out there. So we've got a really fun sort of this domes observatron concept of, if you remember when you were in elementary school, there was a thing called the multi-purpose room. Well, this is kind of the multi-purpose planetarium. The most incredible new screen technology you can imagine, paired with flying seat technology and motion bases, paired with other flexibility and interesting audio that gives us about 8 different things we can do in one environment, all aimed at putting you somewhere off of the planet. There's also a simulation lab I'll talk about in a minute as part of our immersive learning experience. And the last big bucket was, hey, I want to get hands on, hands dirty. I don't want to just watch stuff. I want to touch things and I want to feel things. So, you heard of the thing, literally there's a system of, they're not on tracks and they're not remote controlled. You drive them. They are literally like Martian rovers, and we will put in some regolith and we will build us a Mars. We got a great plan for a small version of the famous NASA neutral buoyancy tank to do microgravity work in, personal flight simulators, and of course, a big piece of what happens at this particular site is wonderful view shed for launch days at Vandenberg. So those were the 3 big buckets of design solutions that we really had to kind of work through, and then marry that all back to, remember, you got to deliver that, but you got to deliver it to these people for about this amount of money because the pro forma says that's what you can spend. So it's an interesting puzzle. It's a 3 or 4 vector puzzle you have to solve and all bring together at once. Just for fun, sort of what that looks like if you want to take a look at a given attraction is, this is a snag from the experience design plan document for the Mars rover course. So again, conceptual level, right? A lot more design work to be done to get to opening day, but conceptually, there's a write-up. Here's sort of what happens from the guest point of view. Here's ways it could look, theoretically. Here's some, NASA-based analogs of what our little rover could emulate. And then here's the actual company that makes the technology we're talking about using. They've tested it. It works. And everything we have in the design plan has to have that level of rigor and the appropriate pricing and all the things that go with it to pass muster. I want to talk a little bit about education now, because it is central to our premise. It's also key to the project. The land in Lompoc has a deed requirement that it be used for an educational purpose, and indeed we're going to qualify for that because everything we're doing is educational. What's great is, unbidden, the guest said, yeah, we love that this is so educational. So these are actual verbatims that come back from that appeal research. This was the fun part. So we knew, we knew about the blue folks. Said, yeah, well, I'll bring my kid to your multi-day camp experience. That'd be great. But we had a bunch of others that said, well, I'll bring my kid, but can't I stay too? So we discovered this whole family market. And then to top all that, there were people who said, I don't have kids, but I want to come to camp. So we found a much bigger market niche than we thought, which was really great news. And we're all already kind of wrestling with how do we design this in cohorts so we can really custom tailor those experiences. So we call this gold standard education. We've done some of this already for Kennedy Space Center, and it kind of went to school on that, but really it's these things. It's not just making cool stuff for kids to do. And it's not just, okay, here's a lesson plan, teacher. It's really rigorous. The educational substrate of this has to be appropriately instructionally designed. We just brought on a wonderful new consultant to the team, Dr. Deborah Blow, who was the interim superintendent of schools in Lompoc. She's our new education director, and she's really helping focus this now on how to get this right as we go forward, because it is so important. So sort of how it works is we've got a core facility. This is an early thought about our sim lab and how that could look. We've kind of modeled a 3-day program. Like I said, it could be 2 days, it could be 5 days, but it sort of goes like this. Day 1, you're doing all those things in and around the visitor complex. Day 2, you're locked in the sim lab and you're on Mars or you're on the moon and you've got to survive somehow. And day 3, you're probably out doing planetary exploration because we have a handy planet, even though we already live on it. And maybe you're in that neutral buoyancy lab or whatever. And then you graduate. And hopefully, if you come in 5th grade, when you come back in 6th grade, we've got a different program and you can stay with us all the way through post-secondary if you want to. So very central to the plan. So we're getting close to the end here, wrapping up. Here's where we are in our process. We are negotiating with the city of Lompoc. I won't get into the gooey details of that, except that there's a really intriguing deal with the city that we're trying to make in terms of them basically giving us a great deal on the land in exchange for the economic benefit the project will bring to the community. We're working on our capital raise, of course, takes money to do stuff. Feel pretty good about our environmental impact reporting and entitlement pathway. And then once we get farther down the road on those, we enter our design build program, beginning with a true schematic design effort, which is where we put a lot more flesh on the bones than we have now. Generally speaking, here's sort of in storyboard form how that works. We're sort of where the blue dot is in second quarter of 23. And, with the exception of the land agreement, which we hope to have completed substantially by May, we're ready to launch into that next box and get out into the market and really begin to commercialize this rascal. So I showed you where we began. I'd like to close, and then we can talk a bit if you have time, with a different film that is more or less, hey, 15 years from now, oh, I'm sorry, I wanted to show you the economic impacts. My bad. Don't memorize this board. It's just that the punchline here is this thing works. It will make money. It will put a lot of people to work. It will help put Central Coastal California, particularly Lompoc, on the map for tourism forever. It creates a whole bunch of jobs and it delivers a whole bunch of GDP to Santa Barbara County. So we've got the facts to back that up. So that was a big relief to get there. So now here's what this thing could actually look like, maybe, over the next 15 years. So, with any luck, over the next few months, we'll be moving down that road and getting past where that is and stepping into the next phase. Come on, little rascal. All right, I think I'm done yakking at you. Sermon over. Thanks for being patient. Yvonne, it's up to you, but if we have time for questions or if you want to argue, that's fun too. Do that.
We definitely have time for questions. So people oh, I see some hands raised. Robert, you had a question?
Oh, actually, I was just applauding, but I do
Oh, okay.
I do have questions. Anyway, thank you. I just appreciate your passion. We need that kind of energy, more of that. So one thing that is infuriating when you go to Disneyland is just the long lines for everything. Do you have any way to have all the fun and hands-on without that downside?
Yeah, it's funny. The line is the last great frontier of destination entertainment. The flip side, although most people don't believe it, is the only thing worse than long lines is no lines because it feels vacuous. Yeah, I'll tell you. There's a little bit, I think, of a mitigation factor is this: Disneyland is a very, very high popularity, middle market, mass market product intentionally. Walt was very focused on, he once actually said ours is a beer and popcorn audience. He really wanted to make a place for everybody. It's not that we don't want to welcome everybody, but Disneyland probably does. I haven't looked lately, but Disneyland probably does, I don't know, 20 million plus attendance a year. Our whole park does 300,000 attendance a year. So the thing that helps us size a park is a thing called design day. It's an industrial engineering calculation. And it basically is the way we don't build the church for Easter Sunday. So, our design day is about 1,100, which means in 85% of the time, through a single operating day, we're only going to have 1,100 people come visit. That's not all at once. That's for the whole day. So our parking lot only holds about 128 cars. So the bottom line is we'll have lines, but we won't have lines like a Disney park or Universal park. And in fact, because of that, we're not driving for a high theoretical hourly capacity. We're going the other way and say, no, we're going to take some individual time with you to teach you how to put this flying rig on and really do it. Our cycle time through a ride might be 50 minutes because you need to really train. So that'll be part of it. On the other hand, all due respect, I hope we have some lines because I'd like the thing to be successful.
Other questions? With the 1,100 people.
No, Marco has a question.
Oh, Marco, go ahead.
Yes. Thanks very much for that, Bob. I'm definitely going to be in the 59%. That's definitely going to go. I wanted to ask you a little bit about different types of guests. Where I'm coming from, I founded a sensory museum in Santa Barbara. I've done some work for Imagineering. So in terms of like what they used to call the experience economy, and there's some people like me that want to be interacting the whole time, and then there's some people that want to take a more passive role and get stories, and then there's a couple others. So how do you design for, accommodating these different kinds of people?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a couple of answers. One is you start by understanding who the likely audience is, and you can do that with market analytics. So we have a pretty good demographic and psychographic sense of who's coming and how many of which kinds there are, and you can make some reasonably informed guesses about what preferences are based on that. Plus, we have anecdotal and open-ended reactions to our concept tests. So, when you let people tell you, they'll tell you, I don't like thrill rides, or, hey, this sounds boring. The other side of that is I always use a movie analogy, right? A movie with just chase scenes wouldn't be any good. And a movie with just sort of people standing around doing lines at the lens wouldn't be any good. So you have to have a balance. So for a park like this, we want the storytelling to take the lead. So the question we always start with is, hey, what's that story? Well, that story is when human beings adapt to microgravity, all of their normal behaviors don't work. Okay, what's the best way to tell that story? Is it something that you read? Is it something somebody tells you? Is it a piece of media that does it? Or should we stick you in an underwater tank with a wrench in your hand and say, try turning this bolt, Or should it be a hybrid? So, and I don't think there's any magic way to get at your question. It's always the right question, as you know, because you're in the business. But I think that's the way we think about it.
Thank you.
I want to come to your place.
Love to have you.
Next time I'm out, I'll make it a point.
Great. Let's see, we have a couple of questions in the chat. Lynette asks, do you have involvement from UCSB or Cal Poly in this project?
We have not spoken too much with UCSB yet. We have had pretty deep conversations with Cal Poly, particularly at Santa Maria. They're very interested. I would say generically, we are very hopeful for pretty deep educational partnerships, probably on definitely 2 legs and maybe 3. The definite 2 are, one would be a hospitality program relationship where, you know, we're in the hospitality business, and so we know how important that is in all disciplines, from entertainment to culinary, right? The other side is probably on the space science and engineering content development and expertise side. And then the other side is we've worked quite a bit with Cal Poly's architecture department. We worked with, now that I need his name, I can't remember, but we actually had their students do some design work competition for us, and they did brilliant stuff. So yeah, we've worked there. Obviously, our site is right next to Allen Hancock College. I mean, literally, we touched their parking lot. So we've certainly had a lot of deep conversations with them. And also Lompoc Unified School District. We've gone 4 or 5 work sessions with them saying, you guys tell us what you want us to tee up. What would you like this thing to help you teach better? So we hope the educational partnership side of this is pretty high, wide, and handsome.
Great. Yep. There were a couple of questions about the site, and so maybe you could talk about that a little bit more. One of the questions was how important is it to be near Vandenberg, and do you have a site? So.
You know, we do have a site, and I apologize for not showing you that picture. Somehow it didn't make the PowerPoint that I ended up using, but yes, we do have a site. It is, if you know Lompoc at all, I'm going to look for this slide while I'm talking, so that's why I'm not staring at you. If you know Lompoc at all, Allen Hancock Park is, you know, if you go all the way down H, heading toward the turn where you go to Vandenberg, it's literally right there at that corner. There is an 85-acre parcel there that is called Kinadam Park. It's not really a park. There's a little swing set there, but it's just a big chunk of scrub. Those 85 acres are the site. It's up on a bluff. So the prison farm field is just to the lower left, and it's got really nice view shed to the south base launch slicks. So that's the site. And I would say the proximity, particularly the viewing angle to space launches, is important. What we learned when we did Spaceport America is you can't base the project on launch attendance because launches are fickle. Sometimes they happen and sometimes they don't. And that's the nature of launches. That said, SpaceX alone has basically committed to grow their launch cadence to upwards of 40 a year, certainly by the time we open. That's just SpaceX. So we feel pretty comfortable that there will be a lot of rocket ships launching. Where I live in Orlando, of course, we're lucky. We get to see them whenever they go. And we went from, you know, the end of the shuttle program and 0 launches for many years to the point where now, like Space Monkey just sent me a notice, hey, there's a SpaceX launch this afternoon. So, you know, we think there'll be plenty of launches to look at. I will tell you this, I've been on our site for a night launch from SpaceX's pad. It's absolutely spectacular. It flies right over the property. So launches are a big deal, as you'll know if you ever go down to Lompoc on a launch day. You know, there's a lot of folks. And speaking for me, I've probably seen a dozen launches from some portion of Kennedy Space Center Launch Complex, including being at the press pad, which is as close as you can get unless you're an alligator. Every time I go, I tear up. I mean, you know, so it's always a big deal. I don't care how many times you see it. And I'll tell you what's even bigger deal if you're a sci-fi nut is that booster landing back on site, the SpaceX booster, that's the coup de grace. That's the one that says, okay, I'm living in a Ray Bradbury story. I just, you know, I need a beer, you know. So we'll have those too, by the way. So yeah, we think it's pretty important. I mean, you could do a space project like this without a launch facility, just a lot better with one.
Okay, let's see, we have, do you have involvement from NASA, SpaceX, and the other companies at Vandenberg?
Yeah, we've just reverse order. We have done a lot of presentation work with Vandenberg. They are very receptive. They're really, really cool. Last time we went out to meet with the colonel and his team, they gave us a half hour and we stayed 3 hours. Their request, not because we wouldn't leave. And they're very supportive. You know, they are that said, they are the military. What the military can do is, thank you, this is very interesting. We think what you're doing is really cool. Keep us posted. You know, you can't say, hey, how about a multi-million-dollar investment? But I think they're going to be good content partners and good branding partners. SpaceX has been involved in one way or another from our initial story jam. We actually had SpaceX folks in the jam. They were part of creating the concept. We stay in regular touch with that gang, and again, very supportive. We know folks at Blue Origin. We've talked to them about it. They're a little more guarded because, frankly, they're sort of competitive with SpaceX, and right now, SpaceX is a Vandenberg thing and Blue Origin isn't. So there's that. We have good relationships with NASA, primarily at Johnson in Houston, where we've done a bunch of work. Before we even went too far with this concept, we took our Johnson Space Center pals through it. Said we're not, again, can't ask you for an endorsement, but we can't ask you what you think. And they were very, very pleased. They said, you keep us posted. You know, remember, they have a mission to communicate about space. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were some specifically NASA content at this project brought by them, because they've got lots of it. They got a warehouse full of it. So far, the space industry is I would say, tacitly supportive. Are they jumping up and down to invest? And is it no? They have to build rocket ships. So that's where their focus is, and that's where their focus should be. When we get a little further along and we're not saying, no, honest, we're going to do this, we think we're going to have a much more robust conversation with all the space industry side of things.
Okay. You asked about arguments. We did get a comment on the Facebook post about this, about traffic issues on Highway 1.
Comes up all the time. It's a great question. I'm going to go back to our design day. So our design day is 1100. About a third or more of those will come in buses. We're talking about 3.5 people to a car. So 150 to 200 cars. About 7 times that is the daily commuter burden between Lompoc and Santa Barbara. So the answer is, if it's crowded, don't look at us. It's not us. You want an exemplar in a really good year. La Purísima mission does a couple 100,000 visits. So we're going to pay attention to traffic. We're going to do the right CalDOT study, and we'll do all the proper look-sees. But again, this isn't Disneyland. That's not the goal here.
Okay.
I found the site plan if you guys want to see it.
Sure.
Hold on a sec. I was looking for the other version of it, but this one will do. Yeah, let me just use this one. This doesn't have all the context, but so this is a sort of early pass at the project, literally laid out on the Google Earth imagery of the site. Yeah, so this green area here underneath the key, that's the prison farm. Vandenberg is that away. If you look in the direction of my cursor, it's over there a couple of miles. And here's the roadway systems out here. So you can kind of see then there's Hancock College to orient you right there. The other wonderful thing is, when they did Hancock College, there are already in-ground utilities all along this service road. So all the storm water, sewer, all that stuff is already there. So that's pretty cool. We probably won't stick our parking lot here, and the layout's real different now because we've gone a lot further than this. But yeah, that's basically where the thing sits.
Great.
Okay.
We did have a question. How can local businesses, especially engineers, scientists, consultants, and investors, get involved?
So we have, there's a couple ways. We particularly like you investors. And by the way, small investment, just so you know, we've gotten where we are with friends and family investment to the tune of about $1 million, and I'm one. But that's still on the table. So you don't, if you have 40 or 50 million, we really would like to talk to you. But if you don't, we'd still like to talk to you. So our CEO, Steve Frank, is the guy to see, and he domiciles in London, but he has a place in Lompoc, and he'll be back there in a week or so. If you go to paleblue.ventures.com website, there will be contact information for Steve. And Yvonne, I can send you also Steve's contact information. Please feel free to share it. Steve's the guy to talk to. He's a real affable guy. He's a real friendly guy. He's not like a Hollywood dude at all. Steve's background, he was a Navy pilot, and he got out of the Navy and kind of was young and became a successful investment banker. And that's what he's been doing for years and years. And he's not an entertainment guy at all. He's an aerospace guy. He wants to do this out of pure passion. So Steve's the guy to talk to, and that's the way. I think that said, tactically, the other way to get involved is, hey, have coffee with us. Tell us what's on your mind. We're pretty open-minded. We don't have all the answers. We know what we know, but we know a lot less. So let's talk. And the more local, the better.
Great. Let's see, I'm looking through the questions. We have, how many people will the lodging experience accommodate?
Opening day, the pro forma is for 75 rooms. And it's a really interesting, don't think of it as like a Holiday Inn where there's a bunch of hotel rooms in a box. It's more like on-base housing for Space Base California, kind of spread out in and around the space base. It's pretty cool. We call them lodging pods.
Cool. This sounds really exciting. I'm hoping it gets built.
You and me both.
Yeah. Do other people have questions? There's a lot of comments about great info. Thanks, very interesting. Yeah,
Well, that's
a lot of kudos. So
nobody said, when is this yo-yo going to leave? So that's good.
nope. No. Anybody else? Well, we really enjoyed your talk, Bob. Thank you very much.
Thanks again. Thanks for inviting me too. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. And Yvonne's got my email. If anything comes to mind, feel free to send me a note. Glad to keep the conversation going.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks,
Great.
y'all.
We'll see people next month.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.